Hey guys, Senza here, your favorite solo male entertainer. Borderlands 3 gave us guns with legs, and the only thing I hoped Borderlands 4 could deliver was a gun with not only legs but the ability to walk out on me and never return, just like my father. Gearbox unfortunately didn't deliver, but unlike my father, I return once again with another installment of a very poorly named challenge run I created 6 years ago. In the Borderlands series, you pick a neurodivergent certifiably insane protagonist and amass a giga arsenal of prostate pulverizing weapons and skills to become God and then eventually kill actual God himself. Today, we are going to take everything that makes this game enjoyable and straight up piss all over that said power fantasy, only using common rarity gear and never slotting in a single skill point or action skill for the entirety of the game, essentially turning this challenge into a Call of Duty campaign on veteran, aka an alternative form of self-harm. Can you beat Borderlands 4 with only white gear and no skill points? This story takes place on 2026's travel and vacation destination of the year, Kairos. Visiting this planet was loads of fun. Fun as in fun for the locals that had no problem RKOing your cranium from the top ropes. The inhabitants that resided on Kairos were so unhinged and unmedicated that they somehow made Claptrap look like the least autistic person here. But enough about this joyous piece of septic heaven. It was time to answer to this Senza-sized job of a challenge. I'm happy to announce that fortunately, we have 4 options to choose from when it comes to picking a character in Borderlands 4. And frankly, just like my social life, their usefulness doesn't exist, as action skills won't be used at all during this challenge. Amon's girth was remarkable, and I had always wanted to roleplay as a certified testosterone meatloaf, so we went with the option closest to that. After abandoning a cult life, Amon decided to pursue vault hunting to afford more anabolic steroids. And for that, he was generously compensated to the tune of a lifetime of imprisonment and essentially a lobotomy. Through the subtle means of slavery, the timekeeper, who so happened to be the ruler of this planet, decided to throw a marginally effective government tracking device in my anal cavity. I say marginally because not even within a minute of having this thing planted in me, here came a mysterious benefactor that assisted in getting me out of here. While RJ here recovered from his testosterone contact high from being within 5 minutes of Amon, I quickly checked to make sure our first weapon was in fact of white rarity, and changed Amon's name to that of a really handsome and successful Patreon subscriber. Early game, this rarity tier of guns and armor are surprisingly decent, and do about as much damage as a Borderlands movie did to the IP as a whole. But don't be deceived, because later on, in terms of efficiency, I would literally rather eat a homeless man's dick cheese rolled into a Baby Bell cheese roll and fine aged for 20 years than having to take on some of the later bosses with the full white gear arsenal. Speaking of consuming things, I feel like this would be a perfect segue to talk about this video's sponsor, so you know I can pay taxes and avoid an aggressively educational encounter that may involve a violent beating by the IRS. Have you thought of embracing healthier habits such as smoking cigarettes, gambling, and eating healthier, more nourishing meals? Are you tired of spending a painstaking amount of time getting food prepped and are looking for unmatched convenience in the form of high-quality, clean, and nutritious ready-to-eat meals? Well, I don't care if you said yes to any of those questions because I'm going to tell you about this product whether you like it or not. This video is sponsored by Factor, and thanks to them, making balanced food choices has never been easier. Due to a malformed frontal cortex, I am unable to critically think, so cooking is out of the question. But thankfully, Factor has solved all of my problems. Factor delivers fresh, never frozen, dietitian-approved meals straight to your doorstep. With so many options to choose from, achieving your goals has never been easier. Whether you're tired of being a Whopper American and looking for a calorie-smart option, or looking to bulk up with the high-protein option, Factor has your back. On top of that, the meals are ready to eat within 2 minutes, so you get to focus on life, and Factor will focus on nutrition. Head to factor75.com or click the link below and use code Senza FB50 to get 50% off your first Factor box, plus free breakfast for a year. That's code Senza FB50 at factor75.com to get 50% off, plus free breakfast for 1 year. Thanks to Factor for once again sponsoring this channel and the sentence-enhancing verbal shitpost I produced, and let's get back to the raw, unaltered footage of me getting gaped the diameter of the Taj Mahal via the means of a video game challenge run. The guardsmen in this prison did not speak English, which meant that I had to communicate through the universal language known as violence. Blasting through this episode of the critically acclaimed crime drama known as Prison Break wasn't very difficult because it was quite apparent that its defense budget had been cut pretty damn hard. It was time to fondle my first loot chesticle, and thanks to my crippling delusion, I genuinely thought that there would be a worthy upgrade in this bad boy to assist in our escape. I was horribly wrong, and after trudging through the hepatitis alphabet swamp, RJ told me to locate a shield, and that too, of course, wasn't of the white rarity. This was where I came to the realization that RNGesus wasn't on our side, and most of my upgrades were going to be at the will of vending machines, which undoubtedly was an unfortunate obstacle I was going to have to tackle for the rest of the challenge run, because checking them constantly for even the slightest statistical upgrade was a must. But I'll shit those pants when I eventually wear them. Since the only two shields offered to me was that of green rarity, that meant I was going to have to raw dog a Warden's Scathe, our first boss fight and the only obstacle separating us from a very modest amount of freedom. The Warden and I had a very positive and completely friendly interaction, in which he gave me head in exchange for free critical hits that absolutely tore through his health bar. Thanks to this well-placed crate in the middle of the arena, I was able to pop a squat here and pick at him from safety. Every time he made my testicles fucking explode, I was able to get a quick and easy second wind from the goons running around the place, making our first fight an absolute breeze. By the God Emperor's will, I was rewarded with a white energy shield and a grenade mod, which was a massive development in this challenge run, because these very well may be the only upgrades I received for a while. But my joy was brief. After I was done ripping and tearing through Warden's Scathe, I began to wonder who was ripping and tearing some onions, because the timekeeper was quick to show us how much of a blistering hemorrhoid he was, forcing the GOAT RJ, the man that saved us, to enjoy a lower quality of life that is typically only caused by death. Following our great escape, I awoke on a beach, greeted by everyone's favorite clanker, Claptrap. This wireback somehow landed a job as the new leader of the Crimson Resistance. Their intent aligned with ours, which was to beat the timekeeper's cheeks raw, and that alone meant that I was in. Our first goal was to get a radio tower up and running so we could recruit more members for the Resistance. But swiftly, we discovered that this area was run by a group of psychos that have dubbed themselves the Rippers, who not only wanted to murder us, but also probably sex traffic us after they were done harvesting our organs. We infiltrated their camp, I realized that my weapon was starting to do dick all for damage, got my shit rocked by a badass mangler, and then was commanded to take down the community loot cum dumpster known as Splash Zone. Thanks to the scientific method, it didn't take me long to figure out that at this point, environmental throwables and my fists did more damage to these brainlets than my actual gun. The anatomy of these measly little rippers was no match for that of the girth demon Amon.
Now I understand your need. Now I understand what it do. Now I understand what it brings out inside of you, baby.
I made my way through by caving in the skulls of any that dared stand between me and Nickelodeon's Splash Zone, and once they were taken care of, I entered his Thunderdome. I used the safety hazards littered around this place as a safety lesson to him and his health bar, grabbing a cheeky little second chance whenever I went down. I could only imagine Splash Zone was filled with terror in his last breathing moments as I violently fisted him till completion, and the rest of his followers didn't stand a chance as sliming them was non-negotiable. Splash Zone's death turned my panties into a splash zone when I saw that he left me a nifty little Malawan SMG. With its fire and shock attribute, I was now able to deal with shields and finally ditch this taint tickler of a squirt gun that I had from the beginning of the game. On my way back to our favorite bolt bucket, Gearbox was kind enough to deliver a heartwarming moment where you are able to free a few Kairos dogs from their captivity. After petting them all, I put my new glider and weapon to the test, scaled the radio tower, joined the Kairos fetishist community by giving Claptrap a well-deserved dose of erotic electrostimulation, and then finally got some good upgrades. Which leads me to our next segment. Before we continue on this crusade, we should first quickly go over the challenge playbook. So Operation My Dad Left for 7 months only to visit for 45 minutes and never return was now a go. Unlike Piss Kyle American Diaper over here complaining about my upload schedule, we are going to discuss our avenues of success so we don't complain about this challenge. Forged through the trials and tribulations of my past lives, a primordial knowledge lay dormant within me, and this Jacob's shotgun was the key that awakened it. Jacob's white rarity weapons are a must this run, just as they were in my past challenge runs, and there are 2 reasons why. Firstly, because firing them not only feels great, but is the closest thing you can get to having sex in this game, and second, because they fuck unapologetically hard. Their manufacturer bonus will assist with extra firepower and is all over BIS for a challenge like this, especially since the only way I'll be able to get through some of the later parts is by violently massaging my enemy's critters. With the operation now over, I just want you to know that you definitely won the genetics lottery, and I think that haircut suits you nicely. Either way, let's get back to the video. Like a starved Victorian child, my new Jacob's shoddy was hungry, and it had no problem disciplining these goobers until it was satiated. Our only difficult hurdle on the way to Outbounders HQ was this badass enemy here that bent me over and spread my cheeks. But not even a Flintstone vitamin could save him from Mr. Jacob and his persuasive ways. Finally, contact was made with the Outbounders, and they agreed to join the resistance as long as we agreed to help them exterminate the annoying pests at their door. After a quick jog, we were introduced to Call of Duty weapon mastery Diet Thanos and his henchmen, who were apparently viciously offended by the fact that the Outbounders were not their slaves. These chumps were in for a rude awakening, and nothing could save them from the Jacob-sponsored shotgun colonoscopy that had their name on it. With his troops decimated by our hands, Rotund Sky Thanos let us know that we had done goofed, and he planned to use his secret weapon on us that was presumably beyond we were going to die. I met with Rush, the leader of the Outbounders, and he let me know that he would rather give himself a prefrontal lobotomy using a heroin addict's rusty syringe than let Sol, the great value Thanos we ran into earlier, win in this standoff. I was gifted a mobility scooter, found myself a new shield, and then set off to question Sol's local troglodyte on his boss's whereabouts. I lasted all of about 10 seconds in Horus's HQ before expiring to a barrage of lead, but thankfully we were here to kick some ass, and Kairos was full of all types of asses to kick, so getting freebie second wins wasn't much of a problem. I blasted my way through, being serenaded by the sexually deranged freak that ran this place, and I'm going to be honest, I got the ever-living piss beaten out of me. Even using the right elements, each enemy took a mag and a half and about 5 minutes to murderize. Eventually, I entered Horus's boss fight room and was immediately met with the unforgiving reality of this challenge. It really wasn't a difficulty, seeing as I didn't fully die a single time, but my arsenal, which did about an ant's dick of damage to his health bar per shot. After what felt like an eternity, whittling down Horus's health bar, it started screaming for a fisting. Was this the best idea, seeing as failing would result in me wasting another 20 minutes? Well, just like if Pokemon were real, the only question we would ever ask is if we could, not if we should. Ignoring all the potential ramifications, I attempted fisting him and left a champion. That was now 2 Kairos natives humiliated by my fists. Digging through Horus's Neuralink led us to the advancement that Sol's weapon was in fact Order technology, which meant that it was time to tackle Rush's lead and head on over to P. Sherman Wallaby Way to meet with the Order scientists that lived there. Thanks to my remarkable initiative and independence, I was able to take care of the booby traps that littered this hideout and located Zadra, the scientists in question. As a consequence, Sol decided to I'm not giving this enough justice. Diarrhea dump all over my parade by kidnapping the person I came all this way to talk to. Zadra's hut made the fight against Sol's men tolerably tolerable, and if you're doing this challenge, I suggest you abuse it too. I know taking cover in a video game is common knowledge, so as a bonus, I'll give you another tip. Every 24 hours, a new day begins. With reinforcements taken care of, we tracked down Zadra's location to a local meat processing plant. But before we set off, I did a bit of shopping. Saving our resident scientists was going to be a toughie, not only because the enemies now overleveled me by quite a bit, but also they could confidently and effectively murder me without even trying. To avoid getting put into the prostate pounding machine, I was going to have to rely on this new Jacob sniper I obtained for a few shekels earlier, and man, did this thing rip. Within 26 minutes, the ass-fucking superstar known as Mr. Jacobs acquainted himself with this processing plant and its employees. I did fall victim to a few deaths, but instead of taking accountability and improving my skills, I'm simply going to blame the difficulty of this challenge instead, because I'm a sore loser. Now that Zadra had joined the party to collab in this Eiffel Tower against Sol and his men, we began blasting our way out of our now second prison break. This part was beyond easy, and having backup was quite nice. Although she was kind of useless in the damage department, she could at least get a revive off on me when I had fallen and couldn't get up. As we hit the home stretch of our escape, Zadra was able to use the teleporter to instant transmission out of here, and for a hot second, everything seemed fine and dandy until I was slapped with a state of overall panic and despair. I had genuinely forgotten about the upcoming boss fight against the oppressor, and wasn't mentally prepared for another time-consuming tussle, or at least so I thought. The latter half of this prison break already had me chubbed up thanks to it being an absolute breeze. You can only imagine how hard I was when I discovered that the oppressor was an absolute pushover. My erection was at critical mass. Diamonds should be afraid. It still took me nearly 10 minutes, but my Maliwan SMG and Jacob's sniper put in some serious work. Not once was I edged by death or even came close. Now that both of Sol's greatest assets had been toppled, it was time to get Zadra on our side and take him down. Our new friend was desperate enough to join our crusade for free, and even gave us crucial intel on how to take down the Timekeeper. The keys to his chastity belt were 3 Neuralinks placed in the necks of each of his most trusted allies, Sol being one of them. Before we could spank the ass Sol himself, we first had to take down his bioweapon. I stormed the production facility, and Jacob began to lay waste to the poor souls that worked here, only dying a single time making my way inside. Leaving wouldn't be as easy as getting in though, as Sol had countermeasures that planned to permanently pause my existence. The first and most important step in any ass-clapping strategy is playing like an absolute maniac and never standing still. Being stationary for even a second spelled my death with a capital D, and surprisingly, this fight sucked marginally less than the other ones I had done, thanks to this corrosive Maliwan shoddy I found earlier. Bio shithead was put down, and after speedrunning the destruction of the weapon that threatened the Outbounders, it was clear that the atomic smegma known as Sol needed to meet his subsequent demise. So naturally, the plan was to stop him by once again storming his fortress and committing mass genocide on his underpaid and overworked employees. Originally, I thought that this would be a great and stress-free plan, as I assumed I would have an ample amount of backup. But that was until I was left alone, shot, cryo-detonated on, and had my posterior side pounded by enemies. Once the horde was taken care of, we still had to breach the fortress gates. Rush let me know that in this world, the longer you spend alive, the greater your chances of becoming a troglodyte, so he willingly decided to meet his god as long as it got me closer to ending Sol. His sacrifice would have been greatly remembered, but technically he survived thanks to Zadra, and I went on. What followed was about 45 minutes of me using my girth to personally spread and divide every pair of cheeks that littered this place. Me and my arsenal cleared his fortress at a relatively geriatric pace, and considering I didn't die a single time, this was an absolute win. I dropped down into Giga Rick Harrison from Pawn Star's domain, and he let me know that the best he could do was either kill me or give me a venereal disease using his bioweapon, but I had other plans. Honestly, I was expecting our first actual boss fight to be the most challenging fight thus far, but Mr. Big McLarge's pronouns were pounds/kilograms, which meant he was quite slow, and I could run circles around him while simultaneously evicting his brain matter from his skull. Not even being briefly rendered a paraplegic or his life regen mechanic sent shivers down into my testes, because a well-placed headshot with this Jacob's sniper was the answer to all of my problems. With my white shields, success was honestly less about skill and more about evading his arena-wide attacks. Although he was an augmented god, Sol was creamed, and the Outbounders were free of his oppression. Once my dopamine and cortisol levels were stabilized, we wasted absolutely no time. I was out here collecting these Neuralinks like they were Pokemon badges, and the Ripper Queen over in Carcadia Burn was next on the chopping block. I shopped for some new weapons, hopped on the mobility scooter for a nice ride through Kairos, and received a distress call from a man named Quent. The same group we ran into earlier, the Rippers, seemed to be prominent in these lands, and I had no problem dealing with this bunch of glue-eating school bullies that needed to be put in their place. All of the Rippers were taken care of, and as a thank you, Quent, the man who seemed like the kind of guy that would put a condom on for his first kiss, got me into contact with Levane, the leader of the Electi. But before we could schedule a meeting, Callus, the queen of the Rippers, made it apparent that she was here to circumcise the inhabitants of Carcadia Burn at all costs. Whether we wanted it or not, we've stepped into a war with Emperor Callus and the Rippers on Carcadia, and coincidentally, I was a machine made to fuck everything and anything in sight, so I agreed to help Levane in the name of justice. Also, that was a Destiny reference for all of my Destiny autists out there. Quent's nothing burger of a solution to destroy Callus's catapults led us to the local bar where we rendezvoused with the familiar face, the canonical, quirked up Jacksepticeye of the Borderlands universe, Zane. It didn't take much convincing to have him join our crusade, and Callus was figgity fucked because not only was Zane a handsome and sexy man, but he also had a fucking pet thresher. Clearing out the enemies surrounding the catapults to let Sophia do her thing put me in a body bag a few times, but that was also partially due to user error, especially during this smooth brain moment I had here, where I genuinely couldn't aim for the life of me. The catapults were inevitably flattened, but Callus couldn't resist the urge to continue diabolically giving backshots to the Electi. Zane, Sophia, and I came to the rescue, and spent about the next 18 minutes being rendered a paraplegic 50% of the time, thanks to my white shields and fence syringe being dookie mega ass. Her forces were dealt with, but we weren't emotionally prepared for the unjustifiable act of horror Callus was willing to commit. Sophia was murdered in cold blood by the hands of the nefarious Dick Supreme over here. This was so sad, and me and my homies now hated Callus. As a dedicated student to the school of ripping and tearing, it was now my civic duty to rip the Ripper Queen a new asshole for what she had done. We met Levane, assisted with the few chores that needed to be done around town, and then set off to locate Zane, who, in a justifiably angry tantrum, stormed off to try and take on Callus alone. Carcadia Burn was the first real difficulty spike of this challenge so far. Pounding through each of the Ripper camps to find the passcode to their fortress had me and my orifices on life support. Just the sheer amount of firepower they output was too much for my measly little shield, and I was in dire need of an arsenal upgrade, seeing as I was still using the Jacob sniper from the beginning of the run. Working with the cards we were dealt, staying back and picking off my enemies one by one was what optimal efficiency looked like, because even getting within 50 yards of them would result in an immediate and painful vasectomy. Once the passcode had been obtained, I made my way inside the Ripper Fortress, was disrespected by Zane when he decided to style on our enemies instead of reviving me, soiled my diapies a bit when I realized that my enemies no longer had a numerical level, but instead a fucking exclamation mark, and discovered that this fortress held prisoners that were soon to be turned into Rippers. Surprisingly, I wasn't very surprised that somehow Quent was wrapped up in all of this. And although civic virtue is quite rare out here on Kairos, there was no way Zane and I were going to let them Beyblade let her rip on his prefrontal cortex. Thanks to the band-aid strategy that is looping a boss and his goons around the arena, Driller Hole had his holes drilled, I sent him into the afterlife Halo style, Quent was saved, and it seemed Zane had uncovered a way to pinpoint Callus. To locate her, I first needed to make one more pit stop, seeing as our mobility scooter wasn't able to perform under pressure. Since this mission was quite similar to the others we had done, I was essentially prepared, and pleased to see that this place had 40% less CBT than what I experienced when I first entered Carcadia. For those of you that are here for the visual dopamine of me struggling and are disappointed that I had an easy time tearing through that place, well, I have great news for you, because immediately after this fetch quest, it would appear that Gearbox no longer wanted me to play the game. As soon as I crossed the canyon to Callus's domain, I was swiftly met with a couple of immediate and rather nuclear-themed deaths, meaning that my enemy's bullets may as well have been ICBM missiles because they were blowing my health bar the fuck up. Every neuron in my brain was locked in to avoid getting my whole ass beaten off. And it was clear that this challenge was alternatively a test to see how many times I could die before having a mental breakdown and being admitted into Arkham Asylum. Unfortunately, this was before I learned that some of the main story quests didn't scale to your level, and I could have just simply ran past my enemies, avoiding this headache entirely. Completely defeated, I realized I needed a break, preferably one with snacks and zero ass rippage. After deviously glicking down a few emotional support ham candles, I sat back down at my workstation and suffered probably a fate worse than death, which was doing a few side quests so that I could catch up to my enemies' levels. I upgraded my arsenal, helped the Electi with some dirty work, tickled Genome's tibias until completion, and got welcomed to the Space Jam. We were now level 19, and I was so mentally stunted from 3 hours of running around Kairos getting beaten that I probably wouldn't even be considered a vegetable at this point. A few more levels probably wouldn't hurt, but there was only so much that I could take, and decided that we would try taking down Callus once again. Upon re-entering Callus's stronghold, it was quite apparent that the budget cuts hadn't affected the Rippers on this side of Kairos, because even after massacring half of her forces earlier, they were all seemingly replaced. This time with stronger fuckers that were apparently fed a staple diet of cigarettes and Callus's breast milk. Success of this mission was entirely dependent once again on this Jacob sniper rifle and my ability to endure my cheeks getting clapped for an hour straight. An honorable mention during this section was Mudmouth. He had no problem humbling me good, but thankfully his harem of retarded manlets were kind enough to delightfully consume my bullets in exchange for my success. Inside Callus's lair, we were given a nice break since the enemies here scaled to my level. Their efforts to stop me were so unremarkable that the hardest obstacle to tackle here was my own autism, seeing as I refused to sit still and jumped around like a maniac during each encounter. I had no problem defending Echo from the horde of experience points, and this Malawan SMG I picked up earlier absolutely f***ed. It didn't take long before I was knocking at Emperor Callus's door. She polluted our ears with textbook cliche supervillain asshole dialogue, but I didn't listen because we don't speak English here on this YouTube channel. We were here, cock and balls out, ready to slap around Callus not only for what she did to Sophia, but also her command bolt. Following 45 minutes of a boss fight whose sole purpose is to make our life frustrating to the point of contemplating a Kurt Cobain cosplay, I ran laps around the arena, clenching my cheeks about as hard as I could, hoping that I could survive as I chipped away at her health bar. This fight was the most tedious fight I had done thus far. It wasn't necessarily difficult, as all of her attacks were easily telegraphed, but it just took so damn long to actually take her down. And also remember kids, I didn't mean what I said earlier. You should never unalive yourself. Think about all the time and effort your therapist put in. Seeing as I was working for below minimum wage to pretty much fight God, I hoped to be compensated with at least one new addition to my arsenal. Instead, I was paid the equivalent of $0 and a verbal hand job from Zane for my accomplishment. With Callus and her moon elevator shut down for good, we were quite limited in our choices of asses to kick, seeing as we now had only a single Neuralink to grab. The people of the Terminus range were rock and stone fueled gremlins, and Vile Lictor, the being holding the final command bolt, was threatening them and all life on Kairos to become a god. Calder agreed to help us take him down as long as I helped facilitate an ass whooping down in the local mines. And although I really didn't want to partake in another fetch quest, I agreed because I needed to pay off my karmic debt after the dog petting session I had earlier in the video. My crusade continued well into the evening, as slinging my meat around in this quest took me quite literally 2 hours and some change. It turns out the Order and Lictor's forces weren't the only ones down here in these mines, because the malnourished and starving wildlife decided it was their turn to experience Amon and his arsenal. Giga Crotch posed a threat by merely breathing, and this was remedied quite easily by just burning the fucker to a crisp. In an interesting turn of events, this was the first boss fight so far where I developed a mild case of death and lost my marbles. But we brushed aside the L and I went back to slapping the crotch once again, squeaking out a stinky little win in my second try. Obtaining Calder's relic led to two massive advancements in our journey. One of them from a mysterious being telling me to locate a siren, and the other, Calder's friends accepted his presence once again and no longer thought he was on an opiate and alcohol-induced schizophrenic bender. Now that Calder's life didn't suck complete and utter testes, he could assist me in locating the siren in question. He pointed me to the location of the wreckage of a downed ship here in the Terminus range, and after manhandling a few poor beings looking for it, we ran into everyone's favorite muscle mommy, Amara, one of 4 playable protagonists from Borderlands 3. Girl Boss Supreme over here was confident that the message I received earlier was from Lilith, which meant that she was out there somewhere alive, and we were going to waste no time as we needed to locate and talk to Lilith. Truth be told, the upcoming mission was quite the relaxing experience as Amara decided to tag along with me, the man with probably the worst loadout in Borderlands history, in finding Lilith. Her assistance almost felt like a legal tech to this challenge run, because although action skills were off limits to me, Amara could go hog wild. She held down our opposition while I creamed them, and our dastardly duo was out here getting more ass than a porta potty at a state fair. The Order guards fancied a fisting equivalent to that our siren buddy was providing to these walls, but Jacob and I knew a few other more effective means. Through meticulous strategy and firm resolve, we took care of the 2 malignant tumors and tackled the Iridium refinery head on. With the processing plant down, Lichter took a page out of the villain handbook and let us know that our efforts were null and his plan to become God was already set in motion. Victory was rather short-lived, but genuinely now a consequence, because after 19 hours straight of the challenge run, I finally had a white class mod drop for Amon. The 13% damage reduction would have gone a long way with my relatively low health and shield pools, but the +2 to a skill felt like a cheat to this challenge. I know it could have technically been a loophole to the rules, but I have a unique brain tumor called self-cucking, and I know I'm CBT maxing enough already, but I just couldn't bring myself to use it. Operating under the reasonable assumption that Vile Lichter was testing on Lilith, we consulted with Calder on the possible location of Lichter's shenanigans, and after doing some vending machine shopping, I grabbed the new shiny Jacob sniper and made my way to the lab's location to meet up with Amara. The creeps guarding its entrance were a much higher level than me, and at this rate my mental state was deteriorating faster than my weapon could their health bar. On the bright side, at least Amara was here to do a majority of the heavy lifting and satisfy my being edged by death but reviving me at last second kink.
Changes your race.
Amara, please! Oh my god! Fuck.
Inside, these creatures and their underdeveloped minds were introduced to the concept of death, which a majority of them had no problem comprehending. Just like how AI is ruining the RAM and computing business so people can make art of Shrek's goat seed bare asshole and cock, Vile Lichter decided to prototype his new enemies who were here to ruin my enjoyment of this challenge tenfold. Using the power of the phase, Lichter made these brainlit dweebs resistant to damage until their shield was removed, and removing it was an absolute nuisance. I expected to receive an embolism in anger and frustration, but this fight in particular wasn't too bad thanks to the goat Hermes. While he distracted the prototype, Amara and I spent a solid 10 minutes dispensing extreme justice on Mr. Deep Dish Asshole over here. With the first vile enemy toppled after what felt like an eternity, we ran into a rather mysterious figure that had familiar siren abilities, decided it was time we brought the fight to Lichter for his crimes against humanity, and I made my way to his fortress to begin the assault. I came into here swinging around as much of my 4 inches as possible, and was eventually acquainted with Bruce, Calder's creation, and the tool we were going to use to f*** the fleshlights that belonged to Vile Lichter. Thanks to Bruce being able to take a majority of the aggro, no longer was this horde of enemies on my ass and sniffing my farts. While he did his job, I blasted away, and although Bruce was too ripe with rage to even take a moment to revive me, I appreciated his ability to make the rest of this mission not completely suck dog ass. We destabilized the phase device, enjoyed some Portal gameplay, entered an area with rather dangerous enemies, had my cock ripped clean off my pelvis multiple times by those rather dangerous enemies, and following the cock rippage, this was where I discovered that any areas with overleveled enemies can be skipped provided that you can survive. Shortly after 12 deaths and having my cortisol Batista bombed, I did probably the least creatively impressive thing your eyeballs could witness and simply ran past a majority of the enemies to locate Bruce. I know this type of gameplay is an abduction of your enjoyment, but I'd rather that than a deduction of my fucking sanity. Just like everyone I love, Bruce seemingly departed and never returned. This was a rather disheartening development, but any sadness quickly faded when Calder let us know that Bruce vicariously now lived through these bombs made of his organic matter. With Bruce's tender love and care, I bombed my way into Calder's fortress, did some shopping, experienced some mind-numbingly boring gameplay, and got folded like fresh laundry before eventually meeting with Amara and Hermes. I worried that destroying the iridium relics in here would be a difficult task, but I had a solution to this problem, and it's called AI unpaid labor and exploitation. I merely just stood back, and these two powerhouses went on a rampage. Admittedly, even the vile duo never made the claim to be Amara and Hermes proof. Despite their premium and latex-free protection, they were susceptible to the worst disease possible: death. Vile Lictor influenced us with the promise of an ass beating, and on our way to his lair, Amara and I were ambushed. In the process, Lictor amputated Amara, and it was time for him to vile lick my taint for his transgressions. To my surprise, dealing with this celestial phallus proved to be much easier than I thought it was going to be. As long as your frontal lobe is intact and responsive, this fight should be a breeze, as surviving depended solely on your ability to dodge his attacks, which are all telegraphed. As always, the trusty Jacobs went a long way here, especially when Lictor decided to peel his foreskin back, revealing his crit spot. In his second phase, I abused the Malawan shock sniper I obtained earlier and just went to town on him, avoiding any and all attacks he threw my way. Within literally 12 minutes and a single try, it was clear that Lictor was all cock but no cum. He came out here swinging and shit his whole ass in the process. Neuralink numero 3 was now in our possession, and the mysterious being showed up to reveal himself as none other than RJ. Apparently, instead of dying, the Timekeeper captured and banished him to the Shadow Realm, where he was waterboarded with Lictor's baby oil until desired results were achieved. He falsely blamed Lilith for everything and claimed that it was now his goal to keep her trapped in the phase forever. Unfortunately for him, we saw that the phase dimension existed somewhere on the moon above Kairos, and after consulting with Zadra and getting the Neuralinks configured, she suggested that we save Lilith before taking on the Timekeeper. I reunited with Zane and Amara and devised a plan to save Lilith. This plan wasn't going to just be 3 retards and Hermes traveling to the moon via space magic. This was 3 retards and Hermes powering up an old space elevator, finding what is possibly the god roll enhancement for this challenge run, taking on an army of overleveled goons, and then crash landing into Elpis after tearing RJ's penile frenulum in an all-holds-barred match. We were now on Elpis, which so happened to be the location where the hit children's video game Borderlands the prequel takes place. I say children's because the game is now 12 years old and is technically a child at this point. Hopefully, I didn't ruin your day like I ruined mine, realizing how old I'm getting. Lilith was trapped somewhere here on this desolate wreck, and it was our job to find her. 6 business days and getting unsubscribed from life 17 times later, we discovered that Elpis was in a power struggle between Callus's Rippers and the Timekeeper's Order. But not even 2 different factions could stop me and my rather serviceable arsenal from reaching the core. Upon arriving, the consensual vote was that I, the borderline psychotic girth gremlin with self-diagnosed autism, was going to enter the Siren Shadow Realm and finally talk to Lilith. We didn't question it because this all just made sense, as this was essentially a rite of passage for a Vault Hunter, and Amon was the only one here who hasn't talked to her yet. I entered the portal, had my brain and eyeballs fundamentally manhandled, enjoyed the very first Borderlands strand type experience, and then finally talked to the Firehawk herself. Some people are mentally unstable enough to do unbelievably painful things to themselves, like putting their testicles in a hydraulic press, or grinding through Borderlands 4 Endgame for over 1,000 hours. But the truly unhinged ones reside here on Elpis. Just like the Doomslayer, apparently Callus was too angry to die, and Lilith was violating the restraining order in her head. As we crash landed towards Kairos, it was up to me to discipline Callus one last time. This fight could have gone much worse, but thankfully I did nothing but suckle on the titty of metagaming this run, which meant I always made sure to bring a decent collection of Malawan weapons with me for moments like these. My white corrosive weapons ate through her armor, and in her second phase, I made an oopsie because I didn't really remember too much about this fight, but I lacked not only knowledge of Callus's moveset, but also respect for the army that accompanied her, so queefing out a few second wins wasn't a problem. All it took was around 15 minutes of me jumping around like a madman, and Callus once again developed an intense parasocial relationship with death. Lilith teleported us to safety, we filled her in on the evil shenanigans the Timekeeper was up to, and then our ears were bukkakied with the information that coincidentally the piece of rock we fought Callus on actually breached the walls to the Timekeeper's city. Within minutes of entering, it was very clear that coming here was an exceptional and efficient way to meet God. Upon securing Zadra's old safe house, we were now finally in the end zone of this challenge run, but it wasn't time to kick up our feet and crack open a Capri Sun just yet. Officially, the Timekeeper was notorious for being a massive hemorrhoid. Unofficially, that didn't matter anymore, because I was here to murder him with my arsenal of dog water weaponry. The path to his tower wasn't easy, as every enemy I encountered made it their personal endeavor to track me down and sodomize me for the crime of even existing. And after all that trouble, it turns out that there was no way to simply waltz up into his fortress without first disabling its defenses. So instinctively, I took a detour to our next objective, the local rail depot, and experienced quite the immersive experience, which was spending a solid chunk of my life getting railed by the Timekeeper's men. This wasn't a scenario I could simply speedrun through. I genuinely had to clear out all of my enemies before I could continue. I was getting cooked, and they weren't cooking my ass well done. They were cooking it congratulations. My weapons did so little damage to them that I, for the first time this challenge run, actually ran out of ammo. This all made me realize that spending 32 minutes to murder a single enemy tickled the itch in my brain I thought only a shotgun could reach. Trying to tackle the rail depot was hard, but not as hard as I was when I was able to finally take down these heathens after nearly 2 hours of CBT. With the capacitor in hand, I skedaddled on back to the Timekeeper's Millennium Tower, avoided an aneurysm thanks to the Goat Riven, and then failed our assault on Dragon Keep once again. Zadra got me out of there right in the nick of time, but this was what the Timekeeper wanted. Instead of saving me, Zadra essentially Uber Eats the bullet to her fucking chest. Our previous assault led to BD1 being brought offline, and thanks to the government tracking/listening device in my anal cavity, the Timekeeper was able to take over Amon and technically ruin this challenge run. The game was rigged from the start. Technically, you literally can't beat Borderlands 4 with only white gear, because as you can see here, the gun we used to perform the murders is of blue rarity. I know this news is heartbreaking to the unemployed and Can You Beat fans alike, but in a shocking twist I know none of you saw coming, I decided I'm going to give it a shot and slap the Timekeeper's cheeks around a bit anyway to see if it's even possible. For this specific run, everything leading up to the Timekeeper fight is merely just an exercise in how many loading screens you can tolerate before choosing to end it all. I'd rather reenact one man, one jar with a chainsaw than sit here actually spending time killing all of my enemies between the objective and I. I followed Zadra's backup plan to a T, met a few inhabitants that had no problem breaking international humanitarian laws watching me just bleed out and die, ran past an army of very angry enemies, and then finally made it inside Millennium Tower to excise the tumor that plagued Kairos. I stood no chance against my AI adversaries, but like Dutch for the 50th time this video, I had a plan. This plan involved sprinting blindly through a sea of enemies toward the Timekeeper. Staying true to the Dutch tradition, this plan sucks straight up poopy asshole, and having unwavering faith in this strategy finally bit me in the ass. Not only did I have to simultaneously deal with vile and badass enemies, but also the horde that followed me all the way here. Some of you may be thinking that I should have just taken things slowly, and that my IQ is so unfathomably low that I should be institutionalized. But please consider that I had been doing this challenge run for 37 hours at this point, and I wanted the f*** out. After attempting different strategies such as creative angles, bold maneuvers, and what I generously call innovative positioning, It became abundantly clear that staying back wasn't just the best option, it was the only option. Not only here, mind you, but also against the two absolute units up ahead, whose apparent life mission was to turn my prostate into fine paste. Once the trash was taken out, I took the elevator up to the timekeeper ass-beating waiting room and entered his Thunderdome. It was time for God to meet my rather shitty arsenal. The timekeeper, as it turns out, comes in two phases, because fuck you, that's why. As long as your neurons are firing on all cylinders, and you could successfully dodge the visual diarrhea he hurls at you, this fight isn't too terrible. Our primary objective was to rock a Noble 6 cosplay and just merely survive. By the grace of Queen America, I was able to actually spank the timekeeper into submission within a single try and in an hour and 22 minutes. If for some reason one of you sick demented fucks decide to attempt this challenge run, the ad density here is generous, so don't bother panicking if you do end up going down. By the end of it, I'm fairly certain the battle did more damage to my sanity than my guns did to his health bar. Running out of ammo was also a massive problem, and it came to the point that I was almost out here rationing that shit like it was World War II. But as I said, the surplus of cannon fodder around made replenishing it quite easy as long as you could survive. With the timekeeper dead, victory had been achieved. Kairos was saved, and the vault sat there calling my name, waiting to be gaped. Inside, RJ was here to edge my victory and test my patience a final time, almost as a sort of victory lap. I finger blasted the fuck out of my space bar and relied on my Malawan weapons to put in some work. Taking him down was quite trivial, as he just runs at you like a deranged lunatic, occasionally throwing in a fancy ability every now and then to catch you off guard. I essentially no damaged this fight, and that was that. I opened the vault, Lilith foreshadowed that there was going to be even more Borderlands on the horizon, and Kairos was saved. For now. You technically can beat Borderlands 4 with only white gear and 0 skill points. If you made it to the end of this shit post, comment #gaped so I can heart your comment and we can confuse new viewers. I appreciate you for making it this far in the video, and just the fact that you spent nearly an hour of your day listening to me spew verbal trash means a lot to me. Just to give you a sneak peek into the next two projects, Witcher 3 and Phantom Liberty No Damage are next on the testicle chopping block, so stay tuned for more content. Thank you to the Diaper Booty Chairman for generously funding the creation of these videos, and if you're interested in chipping in, head on over to Patreon, as any little bit helps. I love you guys and see you all hopefully very soon. Peace, love, and boners.